Jim Carrey was in news recently for being targeted by the internet denizens for his allegedly creepy comments to a female reporter of Heat World magazine. When Charlotte Long, the female reporter, asked Carrey, "In the film, Sonic has a bucket list. I was wondering, after all you have done in your career and in your life, is there anything still left on your bucket list?" Carrey replied, "Just you. That's it. It's all done now." To which Charlotte responded by laughing. Carey's comments left many people fuming, who gave him many a names generally reserved for highly lustful men. Carey was called a pig, sleazebag, and many other things. Few people who tried to defend Carey explained that Carey was not talking about having sex with the reporter, but about the interview, as Carey's representative himself explained as criticisms started pouring out. Carey did not just say, "just you," at that time, but also said, "it is all done now," which means he could not be possibly referring to sex. Few others said that Carey was not a sleazebag by any means, and was just making a funny remark. Whatever way one views Carey, it is not without any irony that Heat World, whose reporter was at the center of this fiasco, recently carried an article titled "Lucy Donlan Throws Shade at Ex Joe Garrett with Savage Leftovers Instagram Post," in which it positively presented Lucy Donlan, a female surfer, suggestively calling her ex-boyfriend "motherfucker" and comparing him to her leftover sandwich. We are yet to see any fallout over that, obviously, because somehow calling a man a leftover is not as bad. Just imagine though, a Muslim cleric calling non-virgin women leftovers. Of course, then obviously one would need to bomb the Middle East to get rid of such sin. Yet what is most interesting aspect of this scenario is that it makes little sense when one puts the context of the West in the situation. Considering Carey, Long, Heat World, many of the Twitter users are all product of the West, and clearly the Western morality is at work here. Yet Western morality is not a side of one of the key features of the West that separates it from much of the East, that is, sexual liberation. West celebrates sexual liberation. Other nations are chided often for not following the Western standard. West is not just pro-sex. The promotion of lust is the main thing that you will see everywhere in the West, from the comics to the television, films, advertisements, songs, and obviously porn. West is also characterized by open discussions on sex. Games are also not left intact, with some of the major ones having actual ways to simulate sex scenes, like the God of War. Quite a few normal television shows contain more than modest attire, and sexual relations are depicted in some manner or the other. Few shows like Game of Thrones are highly popular, even though displaying full nudity and simulated sex on screen. And after all of this achievement of the West, it not being able to handle one comment by Carey is bizarre. Even if one believes that Carey was talking about his wish to have sex with the reporter, how is that offensive in such a society? One could show off body for money in the West under the name of empowerment. Women can twerk off their partially naked butts to millions of people. Even teens could have sex and are taught sexual education. Yet even with freedom of speech, one cannot talk about one's sexual wishes in a normal manner. Even though a singer talking about the same thing and perhaps more, with partially nude women dancing in a sexual manner around him or her, is the modern form of entertainment. This is not a lone incident. Previously, I covered how people in the West were triggered by few Indians writing their want of sex in social media platforms. Apparently, discussing Game of Thrones scenes is not a problem, nor is the problem watching a simulated sex scene in theater with strangers. It is a weird kind of hedonistic puritanism, but mistake not, it is easily explainable. People like sex, especially the people of the West, who have luxury and enough wealth to not only think of sex in terms of a need or a desire, but also an art. Sex is the chief component of the modern art. It is also what motivates the most powerful desires in men and women. As when sexual liberation arose, people of the West just lapped it up. But who could be strong enough to reject sexual stimuli? And why would one do that? Sex is very pleasurable indeed, and watching nude or semi nude depictions of women was arousing for men. For women, the desire to be an attraction for male desire was strong, so fashion became the staple of life. The regressives were merely uncultured to understand the value of sex. In this case, the modern man shared perfect association with all the other animals. Obviously, they were brothers and sisters in some way, according to the theory of evolution. Yet there was a problem with that. People did realize that such a sexual liberation could have very negative consequences. Some could be addressed by laws and were indeed, but many remained. Hence, people needed to find a way to address that, and thus they turned to morality. Morality in the West is one of the two things. Either it represents inherent feelings of disgust or appreciation to an act or thought, or it is something that secures some benefit. The latter is obviously a key point of utilitarianism, which forms the basis of moral sphere of liberalism, which is obviously the dominant ideology in the West. And this is the package people had to buy with the Western civilization, for it was an integral part of it. In this light, everything is now easily understood. Sexual stimulus is pleasurable. So is sex. But what is not pleasurable to the people is a man expressing that he wants to have sex with a woman. It neither bodes well with men who do not see anything in that which is arousing, nor with women. Proposal is not made to them. If made from a man to a woman, who the woman perceives to be of low quality, then it is doubly not pleasurable, and as such, it is bad. Between sexual stimuli and sex, there is obviously sexual will, which connects the two. But keeping that demonized while accepting the other two meant that the West could escape criticisms of being degenerate or hedonist while enjoying all that was lustful and engaging in lustful acts. As in when any act or speech was made so as to represent pleasure, it could not be made subject to a rational critique easily. But saying something in a tone that could not represent pleasure adequately could be subject to such, and needed to be put down so as not to expose such an arrangement. So shaking off one's butt to many is not a bad thing in the West, nor is promoting it. But what could land you in trouble is you have a nice butt. An act that was never accepted publicly as it was by words could never be critiqued by words, and the people in the West could enjoy the simultaneous orgasms of pleasure and morality. Thus, when Cenk Uygur's comments about dating were found by the internet, in which he declared that if you do not have an orgasm by the fifth date and have not felt it by the third, you should leave her, or when he talked about kissing over 23 different women and seeing and feeling countless breasts during Mardi Gras, he was panned. The problem was not that Cenk liked breasts or orgasm, for if the West really had the problem with it, you would imagine they would be like an Islamic society. The problem was that he said what he liked, publicly, and that was unacceptable. He did have freedom of speech, but not freedom to be honest, for that would lay bare the Western morality on sexuality. So while you pretend to like the complete woman, as you see a woman on Instagram posting a shot of her unexposed breasts, remember that you can call her beautiful, label it as empowerment, and criticize anti sex feelings. But do not say that you just like the breasts, even though that is the only thing you like. That is unacceptable.